Have you ever worked so hard, yet nothing goes right? Let me tell you about Àjàní. He was the hardest working man in his village, but no matter what he did, failure followed him like a shadow. If he planted yams, the rains washed them away. If he traded oil, the pots broke. It was as if an invisible hand kept pushing him into the mud. The worst part was not the hunger, it was the shame. People looked at him like he was cursed. Old friends avoided him. Children pointed and laughed. The entire village treated him like a disease. But one person never left his side, his wife, Àjàní. She stayed when everyone else walked away. One evening, Àjàní did something that broke his heart. She sold her last good wrapper, the one from their wedding day, just to buy him new farming seeds. When Àjàní found out, tears rolled down his face. She simply wiped his eyes and said, "A cloth cannot feed us, my husband, but seeds can." That night, a neighbor gave Àjàní a piece of advice. He told him that if his hands could not find the answer, maybe the oracle could. Àjàní was desperate. He had nothing left to lose. So, the next morning, he dragged his tired feet toward the sacred grove. He was going to find out exactly why his life was a living nightmare. In the sacred grove sat an old diviner named Baba Awo. He listened to Àjàní's tragic story, then cast his sacred palm nuts onto a wooden tray. The old man studied the patterns in silence. Finally, he looked up. "You did not choose wealth before you were born," he said slowly. "You chose patience. Your glory is written in the heavens, but it is sleeping. It will only wake in its own time." Àjàní felt a heavy knot in his chest, and he needed food, not riddles. But the old man gripped Àjàní's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me," Baba Awo warned. "Your blessing is coming, but destiny only serves the living. You must be alive when it arrives. Do not let despair kill you before your crown finds you." He pressed a smooth white stone into Àjàní's hand. "Hold this when you forget." Àjàní went home angry. A crown? He could not even afford a decent meal. He threw the stone into a corner and told Àjàní they were moving away. They packed their miserable belongings and left the village before dawn. But before walking out the door, Àjàní secretly picked up the white stone and hid it in her clothes. They traveled for days until they reached a busy village called Edofin. Àjàní rented a tiny piece of land, hoping for a fresh start, and he did not know his worst nightmare was waiting for him. His nightmare came in the form of a man named Kasali. Kasali was the wealthiest and most powerful man in Edofin. He owned the land, the houses, and the people. When he saw Àjàní clearing the small farm, Kasali walked over with a cruel smile. He told Àjàní the land was his, but offered a harsh deal. Àjàní could stay as a laborer on Kasali's massive farms for pennies. Having a starving wife at home, Àjàní had no choice. He swallowed his pride and agreed. For weeks, Àjàní worked from dark to dark. He earned just enough to buy basic food and pay for their tiny room. Nothing was ever left over. He was eating, but he was not living, and Kasali loved to remind him of his place. During a large village festival, Kasali stood up and pointed his finger right at Àjàní. Look at this stranger," Kasali shouted to the crowd. "Some men are born to rule empires. Others are born to carry our dirt. Know your place, peasant." The entire village erupted in laughter. Àjàní stood there, his hands shaking, his eyes glued to the floor. He swallowed the bitter taste of public humiliation. He said nothing. But that night, sitting in the dark with his wife, something inside his spirit completely broke. He began to believe the diviner had lied. The universe had simply forgotten him. Then the ultimate test arrived. Àjàní fell terribly ill. A burning fever took over her body. She shivered violently, her skin hotter than the afternoon sun. She could not eat, drink, or even open her eyes. Àjàní panicked. He had absolutely no money for medicine. He ran through the heavy rain to Casa Ali's grand compound and begged for a small advance on his wages. Casa Ali stood on his dry porch, looking down at the soaking wet, desperate man. "Your dying wife is not my problem," Casa Ali sneered. "Maybe the gods are finally wiping you away." He slammed the door. Àjàní ran through the village crying for help, but doors stayed shut. Finally, a poor old woman named Iya Agba opened her door. She had no money, but she knew the secrets of the forest herbs. She followed him home and treated Àjàní all night. By dawn, the terrible fever broke. Àjàní survived. Iya Agba placed a warm hand on Àjàní's trembling shoulder. "Poverty is not a curse, my son," she whispered. "It is just a season, and seasons always change." Àjàní thanked her, but his eyes were completely empty. The season had lasted too long. The weight of keeping them both alive was crushing his soul. He walked out to the muddy farm, looked up at the gray sky, and whispered, "If you are up there, how much longer?" Only the cold wind answered him. While Àjàní was losing his will to live, something massive was happening far away. In the distant kingdom of Arisi, the old king had suddenly died. He passed away without leaving a single son or brother behind. The grand throne sat empty, and the royal council panicked. They did what their ancestors always did. They went to the sacred oracle for guidance. The ancient oracle spoke through the roaring wind and fire. "The true heir lives in deep poverty," the voice echoed through the temple. "He is the grandson of Prince Akintunde, who left this kingdom many years ago. His name is Àjàní. He suffers in a faraway village. Find him, crown him, but you must hurry, for his life hangs by a very thin thread." The wealthy chiefs were shocked. Their future king was a poor laborer? But nobody dared to question the oracle's absolute truth. Chief Adegoke, the wise leader of the kingmakers, stood up immediately. "Saddle the fastest horses," he commanded. "We ride at dawn." The next morning, the royal messengers galloped out of the palace gates. They carried the sacred staff of Resi and bags of gold. They were riding to find a man they had never met, to give him a kingdom he did not know belonged to him. But they did not realize they were racing against the clock. Death was already knocking on Àjàní's door. Back in Edofin, a violent storm ripped through the village without warning. The winds were brutal, tearing roofs from houses and uprooting large trees. When the dark clouds finally cleared, Àjàní walked out to see his rented farm. It was completely destroyed. The crops were flooded, the soil washed away. Everything he had broken his back to build was gone in one night. Just then, Casa Ali rode past on his beautiful horse. His grand estate was completely untouched. He looked down at Àjàní's ruined farm and laughed. "I told you," Casa Ali mocked. "Heaven itself hates you," and rode away. That was the final blow. Àjàní did not cry. He did not yell. A terrifying silence washed over his mind. He walked back to his flooded room. Àjàní tried to hold him, but he felt like a ghost. He looked at her with dead, empty eyes. "I am going to the farm to check on something," he whispered softly. He turned and walked out the door, never looking back. Àjàní stood frozen in fear. Something felt horribly wrong. She quickly checked his bag in the corner of the room. The thick farming rope was missing. Her heart stopped. A scream ripped from her throat so loud it echoed through the entire neighborhood. She ran out into the muddy streets, crying for help. But Àjàní was already walking toward the deep forest. Àjàní walked deep into the dark woods, far from the village. His mind was finally at peace. No more struggling, no more begging, no more shame. He found an ancient, towering iroko tree with a thick, strong branch. It was the perfect place to end his miserable story. He tossed the heavy rope over the branch and began to tie a knot. His hands did not shake. But as he adjusted the rope, something slipped from the folds of his dirty clothes. It hit the ground with a soft thud. Àjàní looked down. It was the small white stone. Àjàní had secretly sewn it into his garments months ago to protect him. Staring at the stone, the old diviner's warning flashed in his mind. Destiny only serves the living. You must be alive when it arrives. Àjàní paused. For a single second, a tiny spark of hope flickered in his chest. But the memory of Kasali's mocking laughter drowned it out. The pain was too heavy to carry for another day. He picked up the stone and set it gently on the dirt. "Forgive me, Àjàní," he whispered into the empty forest. He climbed onto the large root of the tree, pulled the rough rope securely around his neck, and slowly closed his eyes. He was ready to leave the world behind. He took one final deep breath. At that exact moment, dust exploded on the village road. Àjàní was still screaming for help when 3 powerful horses galloped into the square. And Chief Adegoke and the royal messengers had arrived. They wore magnificent robes and carried the golden staff of the kingdom. The villagers froze in absolute shock. Chief Adegoke raised his voice over the crowd. "We come from the great kingdom of Eresi. We seek a man named Àjàní. The oracle has declared him our new king." "Where is he?" the villagers gasped. "Àjàní? The poor laborer? A king." But Àjàní did not care about crowns or kingdoms. She crashed through the crowd, grabbed the chief's royal robes, and wept. "He went into the forest with a rope. He is going to kill himself. Please save my husband." Chief Adegoke's face turned pale. "Show us the way, now," he roared. But before they could move, Kasali stepped forward, blocking their path. His greedy eyes locked onto the gold and royal staff. "Wait," Kasali lied smoothly, flashing a fake smile. "This woman is crazy. The man you are looking for left this village months ago. Nobody knows where he is, but I am the greatest man here. I can rule your kingdom." The royal messengers hesitated. They were exhausted from traveling, and Kasali looked like a noble leader. The clock was ticking, and Àjàní was running out of seconds. Suddenly, a sharp, angry voice sliced through the tension. "He is a liar!" Everyone turned. It was Ya Agba, the old herbalist woman. She marched forward, pointing her bony finger right in Kasali's face. "This man is a wicked monster," she shouted to the royal messengers. "He has tortured Àjàní for months. He denied him medicine. He humiliated him. Àjàní is still here, and his wife speaks the truth. He went to the forest to hang himself. If you listen to this greedy snake, your new king, will die today." Kasali's face twisted in pure rage. He raised his hand to strike the old woman, but Chief Adegoke drew his heavy sword. "If you touch her, you will lose that hand," the chief growled. He turned to his men. "Ride, follow the wife." The village erupted into chaos. Àjàní ran barefoot toward the dark tree line, her heart pounding against her ribs. The royal guard sprinted right behind her, their heavy boots shaking the ground. Even the villagers followed, desperate to see what would happen. They tore through the thick bushes, jumping over roots and dodging branches. Every second felt like an hour. Àjàní prayed harder than she ever had in her life. "Please hold on," she cried to the wind. "Just hold on." But deep in the woods, Àjàní was already leaning forward, letting his weight fall. The thick rope pulled tight against Àjàní's throat. The air left his lungs. The world started to fade to black. Suddenly, a voice exploded through the trees like thunder. "Àjàní, son of the royal house of Rez, stop!" Àjàní's eyes snapped open in shock. Chief Àdàgòkè crashed through the bushes, his sword flashing in the sunlight. In one swift motion, he slashed the rope. Àjàní hit the ground hard, gasping wildly for air, coughing and shaking. Àjàní threw herself into the dirt beside him, grabbing his face and sobbing uncontrollably. "You are alive! You are alive!" she cried. Àjàní could not understand what was happening. He looked up, terrified and confused. Royal guards surrounded him. The whole village was watching. Chief Àdàgòkè dropped his sword and knelt in the mud right in front of the coughing laborer. He bowed his head low. "My king," the chief said softly, "we have searched everywhere for you." Àjàní trembled. "King? Me?" he whispered with a bruised throat. "Yes," the chief smiled. "You are the grandson of Prince Akíntúndé. The oracle chose you. The throne of Ìrẹsì has been waiting for you." Àjàní looked at the dirt. Lying right beside his trembling hand was the small white stone. The diviner was right. The blessing was real. It just needed him to stay alive long enough to see it. He squeezed the stone and wept. The royal guards helped Àjàní to his feet and draped a beautiful woven robe over his dirty shoulders. They led him back into the village square as a completely different man. The villagers who had laughed at him now bowed their heads in deep respect and fear. Chief Àdàgòkè stood tall and addressed the silent crowd. "From this day forward, Àjàní is the supreme ruler of Ìrẹsì." Then the chief turned his furious eyes toward Kásálí, who was trying to hide in the back of the crowd. "Bring him here," the chief ordered. The guards dragged Kásálí forward and threw him into the mud. "You lied to the kingmakers," Chief Àdàgòkè declared. "You abused the royal bloodline. For your crimes, you are stripped of all your lands, your wealth, and your title." The village council immediately agreed. Kásálí was ordered to leave the village with nothing but the clothes on his back. As the broken, humiliated man started to walk away, Àjàní stepped forward. The square went dead silent. "I will not curse you, Kásálí," the new king said with a steady, calm voice. "I was once exactly where you are going. I pray you survive the poverty better than I almost did." Kásálí did not say a word. He looked at the ground, turned around, and walked into the wilderness alone. The monster was finally gone. A few days later, Àjàní and Àjàní arrived in the glorious kingdom of Ìrẹsì. Thousands of people cheered, drums beat like thunder, and dancers filled the streets. A heavy crown of pure gold was placed upon his head. The man who could not afford a single yam now owned an entire empire. But Àjàní never forgot his painful journey. He sent wagons of gold to Baba Awo, the diviner. He moved the kind old woman, Aya Agba, into the royal palace to live in luxury, and he passed a strict law that no poor person in his kingdom would ever be mocked or denied help. On his very first night as king, Àjàní did something strange. He took that tiny, dirty white stone and glued it to the armrest of his golden throne. It was a permanent reminder of the most powerful lesson a human being can learn. Listen to me carefully. No matter how dark your situation gets, never give up. The blessing you are praying for is already traveling toward you, but it can only find you if you are alive to receive it. Having food, water, and a roof is not a small thing. It is proof that God has not forgotten you. It is the bridge to your future. If Àjàní had given up 1 second sooner, he would have died a beggar instead of living as a king. Your crown is coming. Just stay alive.